when you are always the fixer, a Buddhist lesson on letting go. You are lying awake right now, carrying the exhausting, familiar compulsion to over-explain yourself, mentally drafting another defense to prove that you are not the selfish one in your family. Perhaps an old household friction flared up again today, and because you have always been cast as the designated fixer or the convenient scapegoat, your mind is spinning in circles. You are replaying every accusation, searching for the exact combination of words that will finally make them understand your true motives. Your chest feels braced and physically tight, as if you were standing against a cold mountain wall, expecting another wave of blame to land on your shoulders. The darkness in your room is quiet, settled, and cool. The faint, clean scent of cedarwood oil or drying herbs lingers near your bed, and the solid wooden frame supporting your mattress rests firmly against the floorboards, holding your body without asking you to justify your weight to anyone. Dear friend, this urge to constantly fix family drama and explain your boundaries is not a moral failing on your part. It is simply the weariness of a timber post that has tried to chase down the morning fog, believing that if it ran far enough through the mist, it could force the gray clouds to clear. You do not have to rebuild your family's dynamic tonight, nor do you need to craft a perfect speech to earn their understanding. Your core integrity is already intact, deep within your own quiet wood, and it requires no permission from the mountain to hold its ground. Tonight you are invited to let the fog float past your knots, giving your tired shoulders permission to stop carrying the weight of their unresolved weather. A quiet, unexpected paradox sits at the heart of Buddhist wisdom regarding our oldest family ties. We often believe that if we love our relatives, we must step into every storm they create, acting as the permanent buffer for their chaos. Yet ancient reflection reminds us that endlessly defending your boundaries, or trying to smooth over their self-made turbulence, does not actually bring peace to the household. It merely keeps you entangled in the mist, spinning your wheels in mud that you did not pour. When you try to catch and reshape every cloud of blame that drifts across your ridge, you exhaust your own grain without ever clearing a single acre of their sky. The mind mistakenly insists that if you stop explaining your motives, you are accepting their false accusations as truth. It treats their misinterpretations as a fire that must be put out immediately, even if you burn your own fingers in the process. But a weathered cedar post set deep in mountain shale does not run after the morning fog to defend its position. The post does not argue with the mist, nor does it twist its grain to match the shifting vapors. It simply stays anchored in the cool earth, solid, upright, and quiet, allowing the fog to swirl around its bark and dissolve naturally when the sun rises over the ridge. Think of how much vital strength you have poured into defending your character against people who are determined to misunderstand you. You have held your breath while reading tense messages. You have rehearsed long explanations in the shower, trying to prove that your boundaries were reasonable and fair. Fighting this urge to fix them by getting angry at your own sensitivity only drives the nails deeper into your wood. What if, for these dark hours, we stop trying to manage the fog? What if we allow your spine to become like that cedar post, firmly anchored in shale, completely undisturbed by the gray vapor floating past your sides? Let your shoulder blades settle half an inch deeper into the mattress. Feel the firm, steady support beneath your lower back, taking the full weight of your spine without any effort from your stomach. Listen to the soft, steady rhythm of the night air moving through your room, cool and unhurried against your face. There is no need to regulate your breathing or force it to feel spiritual. Let it flow softly through your throat like a cool mountain breeze passing through open timber, light, unforced, and completely free to move at its own pace. Perhaps you have been assigned the role of the family scapegoat for decades, acting as the quiet lightning rod for every unspoken frustration in your household. In the tradition of Zen practice, we do not view your desire to pull back as coldness or betrayal. It is seen as the natural wisdom of a wooden post that has finally remembered where its roots belong. You do not need to construct a wall of anger to protect your peace tonight. You need only to allow your weight to settle deep into the shale, so that whatever wild weather rolls off the ridge can pass straight over you, without shifting your alignment an inch. In a short while, We will walk up a windswept mountain meadow toward a high pasture boundary, where an old stone mason works with cedar posts and shale terraces. But right now, let your physical body rest in the simple safety of this room. The walls around you are solid, keeping out the cold drafts of the world. And the darkness here is not an enemy, but a quiet, neutral shelter that allows your overstimulated nervous system to power down. You do not have to solve your family's history before dawn. You do not have to fix your siblings, appease your parents, or justify your boundaries before you are allowed to sleep. Your right to exist in peace was never dependent on their approval. The human spirit can hold deep, quiet care for people, while leaving their emotional confusion in their own hands. Let the tight band of muscle across your upper back loosen its grip. Let your lower jaw relax, creating a soft, cool space inside your mouth that lets your neck stretch out fully against the pillow. You are simply an exhausted traveler who has set down a heavy bag of wooden stakes that were meant for someone else's fence. As we drift deeper into the quiet night ahead, remember that your true nature is like a solid cedar post set in high mountain shale. It does not need to chase the fog to prove it marks the ridgeline. The mist can swirl around your knots, touch your weathered grain, and float away into the valley, leaving your wood dense, upright, and completely unmoved in the quiet dark. Let the small, tired muscles around your forehead melt into shadow. Let your hands open slowly on the bed, your fingers uncurling like dry leaves resting on cool stone. There is no argument you must win in this room tonight, no accusation you need to disprove, and no guilt waiting to pull you out of your rest. You have reached the edge of the working day, and your cedar core is completely safe enough to let the fog drift by. Up on a high windswept ridge where wild mountain grass whispered against ancient shale, a young stone builder named Ren sat on a cold stone terrace, staring at his blistered palms. The air smelled sharp and cold, carrying dry shale dust, crushed alpine herbs, and the damp chill of approaching rain below him. Scattered across the lower slopes lay the timber cottages of his family village. For as long as Ren could remember, every time a retaining wall collapsed or a drainage ditch overflowed in the valley, his brothers and cousins would point their fingers at him. They claimed he had laid the foundations poorly, or that he had chosen weak timber, or that his quiet nature was the reason the mountain soil slipped during heavy rains. Ren had spent his youth running endlessly down the steep mountain paths, carrying iron pry bars and heavy wooden stakes to patch every terrace his relative neglected. He lived in a constant state of internal panic, over-explaining every decision, pleading with his elders to understand that he had not built the walls carelessly, and exhausting his body trying to repair structures that his brothers continuously ruined through sheer neglect. He felt entirely responsible for the stability of the mountain, believing that if he could just construct one perfect wall, his family would finally stop blaming him for every mudslide that touched their yards. Higher up the ridgeline, where the grass gave way to raw gray rock, an old boundary mason named Master Jin was quietly resetting a high pasture line. Master Jin wore a thick indigo coat stiffened with dried peat and stone dust, his movements deliberate, unhurried, and deeply rooted. He was not repairing the village walls below, nor was he attempting to stop the rain from softening the soil. He was simply setting solid posts into the high shale to mark where the wild mountain pasture met the forest. Master Jin walked down the ridge toward Ren's bench, carrying an ancient, weathered cedar post across his shoulder. The wood was dense, grayed by decades of alpine frost, notched with rusted iron staples where old sheep wire had once been strung. The old mason laid the heavy cedar post down in the dust near Ren's feet with a dull, solid thud. Ren looked up, his face tight with anger and deep fatigue. He gestured frantically toward the valley below, complaining that his brothers had blamed him again for a fallen terrace wall near the lower creek. He told Master Jin that he was planning to walk back down before nightfall with a fresh basket of mortar to rebuild the entire section, even though his knees were swollen and his lungs burned from the cold air. He asked why his family constantly made him the culprit for every stone that slipped in the valley, and how he could force them to see his true devotion to their safety. Master Jin listened silently, his dark eyes calm and clear beneath his brow. He did not offer pity, nor did he tell Ren to hurry down the path with his tools instead. He stepped toward the edge of the high ridge where the mountain grass ended, and a sheer slope of shale plummeted into the fog. The old mason picked up a heavy iron crowbar and drove it deep into a crack in the shale bedrock. With a slow, steady lean, he dug a narrow, deep socket into the dark stone. He then lifted the heavy cedar boundary post, slid its blunt lower end deep into the shale hole, and packed small, sharp river rocks tightly around its base until the post stood completely upright, stiff and unyielding against the rising mountain wind. Master Jin stepped back, wiping stone dust from his knuckles. He asked Ren to step forward and place his hand directly against the cedar bark. He instructed the young man to push against the post with all his remaining strength, and to notice what happened to his own body when he tried to move the timber. Ren leaned his full weight against the cedar post, shoving with his shoulders, grunting as his boots skidded against the loose shale. The cedar post did not budge. It held its vertical line deep in the mountain shale, dense, motionless, and completely unconcerned with the force Ren was exerting against its grain. The post did not push back, nor did it attempt to explain why it was standing on the ridge. It simply held its place in the stone. Then Master Jin gestured toward a thick bank of cold, gray mountain fog that was rolling up the valley from the lower creek. The heavy mist surged up the slope, wrapping around Ren's legs, swallowing the valley below, and completely covering the cedar post in a wet, blinding shroud. The old mason stood beside Ren in the freezing mist, his voice low and steady. He asked Ren if the cedar post was running down the slope to clear the fog. He asked if the wood was shouting through the mist to prove to the valley below that it was still standing upright on the ridge line. Ren stood silent in the blinding fog, his hand still resting on the rough, damp bark of the post. The wood beneath his fingers felt incredibly solid, dense, and calm. The fog swirled around its knots, condensed into tiny, clear water drops on its weathered grain, and drifted past into the high sky without altering a single fiber of the cedar. The post did not need the fog to clear to remain what it was. It did not need the valley below to see its strength to stay firmly rooted in the shale. Master Jin looked through the gray vapor at Ren's exhausted face. He told the young builder that his family's accusations and constant drama were nothing more than the mountain fog rolling off the lower creek. He explained that Ren had spent his entire life acting like a frantic traveler, trying to push the mist away with his bare hands, running himself ragged to clear a sky that belonged to the weather, while forgetting to anchor his own timber in the stone. Ren stared at the old cedar post as the wet wind whistled through its iron staples. A sudden quiet realization dropped into his chest. Heavy and cold like a mountain stone falling into a deep well. He saw clearly how many years he had wasted trying to fix walls that his relatives were intent on breaking, and how much pain he had caused his own body by treating their false blame as a fire he was required to extinguish. Yet as the fog grew thicker around them, darkening the high ridge as night approached, Ren still felt a quiet tremor of fear in his stomach. He saw the immobility of the cedar post, but he did not yet know how to stop his feet from running down the mountain path the moment his brothers called his name into the dark. This quiet scene on the high mountain pass does not ask you to close your heart to your family, nor does it demand that you become a cold, unfeeling block of stone toward those who share your blood. Buddhist wisdom has never been about turning yourself into a wall of ice to survive the cold weather of human relationships. It does not ask you to stop loving the people in your home, nor does it treat your natural sadness over being misunderstood as a foolish weakness that must be eradicated. Rather, it offers a gentle lantern that illuminates the exact place where our inner exhaustion is manufactured, showing us how we can remain deeply present to life without letting every passing storm uproot our spirit. When a harsh accusation lands in your lap, or when a family member projects their own unresolved pain onto your character, an initial sting naturally travels through your nerves. That original hurt is real, honest, and entirely human. It carries its own brief, sharp sorrow, much like the sudden impact of hail striking bare shoulders on an open ridge. Living alongside other complex, hurting human beings means that cold drafts will occasionally blow through your house. Feeling that initial ache when someone you care about misjudges your motives is simply a sign that your heart remains tender and alive. Yet look closely at what takes place inside your mind during the hours, days, and years after that initial word was spoken. This is where the true, suffocating weight of our suffering takes root and multiplies. Driven by a desperate need to feel safe and recognized, our mind grabs hold of that passing cloud of blame and locks it inside our own ribcage. We lie awake in the dark, endlessly rehearsing arguments, rewriting past family conversations, and building elaborate mental cases to prove that we were not at fault. We take the fog that belonged entirely to the lower creek and turn it into a permanent, damp climate that we carry inside our own lungs. This relentless compulsion to defend your character and fix every household rift is what ancient traditions describe as non-awareness. A deep, instinctual habit of entangling your worth with emotional weather you cannot control. In our everyday experience, this attachment is not a dry theoretical concept. It is that tight, burning sensation in the pit of your stomach that insists you cannot be at peace until everyone in your family agrees on who you are. It is the exhausting demand that the mountain fog must vanish completely before you permit your feet to stop running down the trail. Consider what actually happens when you spend your nights trying to clear the valley's weather with your bare hands. The original conflict may have lasted only a few minutes. The unfair comment was spoken once, long ago, but by continually carrying that accusation into your bed, you bring the mountain storm inside your own room every single night. The original misjudgment was a single, brief gust of wind across the ridge. The endless exhaustion, the tight chest, and the constant urge to over-explain yourself are the secondary weights created entirely by your own refusal to let the mist pass over your grain without grabbing it. Quiet reflection reveals that most of the heavy depletion crushing your chest tonight does not belong to your actual integrity. It belongs to the fog you are trying to catch. It belongs to the impossible, draining effort of trying to make a shifting cloud stay still so you can prove it holds no rain. The accusations thrown by hurt relatives are simply the restless vapors of their own internal terrain. Those vapors hold no power to alter the core density of your wood, and demanding that they see your true shape before you allow yourself to rest only keeps you shivering in their cold air. When we practice soft, spacious awareness, we are not trying to force our thoughts to stop, nor are we attempting to pretend that our family history never happened. Real awareness is simply the quiet, courageous choice to step back from the edge of the slope. It is the willingness to let an unfair comment sit in the fog where it fell, without picking it up and turning it into an iron staple driven into your own ribs. It is the capacity to notice the familiar wave of guilt rising in your chest, and to say to yourself, I feel this old urge to defend my character, but I do not need to run down the mountain tonight to be safe. When you allow your hands to drop away from the heavy iron tools, a natural, deep relief begins to filter through your body. This is the quiet, comforting reality of impermanence made visible in your emotional life. Impermanence is not a grim reminder that everything fades away. It is the peaceful promise that no family drama can maintain its suffocating grip on your nerves if you stop feeding it with your own defensive energy. The accusations that feel so heavy and permanent right now are made of shifting, temporary mist. When you stop chasing the fog down the slope, those old stories naturally lose their momentum, dissolving into the wide sky of your present awareness. The weathered cedar post stands firm on the high ridge, not because it fights the mountain gale, but because its grain is deeply anchored in the solid rock beneath the soil. The wind does not shatter the timber. It merely passes through its weathered notches, carrying away the loose dust and leaving the core undisturbed. In the exact same way, when you stop frantically trying to manage your family's opinion of you, your inner spirit recovers an innate, quiet stability that remains unbothered by external blame. The urge to constantly explain your choices falls away, leaving a clear, grounded presence that knows its own truth without needing an audience to validate it. This anchored presence is your true, unshakable foundation. It was never damaged by the false roles assigned to you in childhood, nor was it weakened by the fact that your relatives still see you through the lens of their own unmet needs. The quiet awareness inside you that witnesses your family's turbulence is completely untouched by their judgment. It remains vast, solid, and deep, like the ancient shale bedrock holding the high boundary posts against the sky. Offering genuine compassion to yourself does not mean that you cut yourself off from love or hold bitterness toward your family. Real self-compassion is simply the willingness to occupy your own ground without asking for their permission. It is the quiet courage to say, "My family may continue to misunderstand my path, and their weather may remain wild and unpredictable, but my true home is this solid, quiet ground, and I am worthy of rest tonight regardless of their storm." Slowly, a deep, cool understanding begins to take root in your chest. You begin to see that stepping out of the family drama is not an act of selfish betrayal. It is the only way to offer the world a presence that is truly stable, clear, and free from reactive fear. Surrendering the impossible job of fixing their house is not a failure. It is the only path toward discovering the immovable peace that was always waiting within your own grain. As you lie here in the quiet sanctuary of your room, feeling the steady support beneath your back, you can begin to feel how close this anchored space really is. It does not require your relatives to change their minds, nor does it demand that old family wounds vanish overnight. It requires only a single moment of quiet surrender, a soft loosening of the muscles around your heart, allowing your core to hold its natural weight without rushing out to manage the fog. In a short while, we will practice a very simple way of grounding your spine in this solid rock within your own imagination. But even right now, as you listen to these soft words, notice how your lungs fill and empty without needing anyone's approval. Your breath moves quietly through the dark, steady, deep, and completely whole, exactly as it is now. If it feels comfortable for your body right now, allow your physical frame to adjust into a position of total ease against the mattress. There is no special way you need to lie, and no alignment you must force upon your joints. You might let your arms drop loosely beside your hips, or allow your hands to rest softly over your lower ribs, wherever your limbs feel most supported and unburdened. If your eyes are still open, perhaps you can let your eyelids close gently, inviting the dark shadows of the room to settle over your vision. Nothing in this room is asking for an impressive posture, and no effort is required of your nervous system tonight. Take a slow, quiet breath in through your nose, letting the cool air travel deep into your chest, and then let it slip out softly through your mouth, letting your spine settle into the mattress like a heavy wooden beam resting against cool, dark shale. You do not need to count your breathing or force it into an artificial rhythm. Simply allow your lungs to expand and release the way the high mountain pass breathes under the evening sky. Steady, natural, and completely unhurried. With every quiet exhale, perhaps you can feel a subtle softening in the muscles around your jaw, your neck, and the spaces between your shoulder blades. If a tight knot of family frustration remains in your chest, that is completely fine as well. You do not need to fight that tension or push it out of your body. Even noticing that old weight without judging yourself for carrying it is an act of deep, quiet restoration. As you lie here in the stillness, allow your mind to turn softly toward one specific family interaction that made you feel blamed, misunderstood, or compelled to defend yourself today. It might be an unfair comment that was directed at your choices, a familiar pattern of over-explaining your motives in a message, or a lingering guilt that you are not doing enough to fix someone else's household crisis. Do not try to solve that situation right now, and do not attempt to draft another defense. Simply let that familiar, aching memory sit quietly in the warm light of your awareness like a cloud of mountain mist gathering over a dark valley. Perhaps you can give a very soft, silent name to what your mind is doing right now. You might whisper to yourself, "This is the feeling of trying to catch the fog." Or perhaps, "This is my spirit running down the mountain to fix a wall I did not break." By naming this internal pattern with a soft, non-judgmental voice, you step back from the urge to run down the slope. You begin to observe the impulse to defend yourself without letting it pull your feet out of the solid earth. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind's eye the image of that weathered cedar boundary post from Master Jin's high pasture. See its gray, dense grain, shaped by decades of mountain wind, and notice the rusted iron staples where old wire once hung. Picture your own spine standing upright and solid like that cedar post, set deep into the cool, immovable shale of the high ridge. Feel how deeply anchored your core is in that stone bedrock, holding its vertical line without any effort or tension. Imagine taking that heavy family accusation, that exhausting urge to over-explain your life, and gently placing it into the center of that cedar boundary post. You do not need to crush the thought or burn it away. You simply allow that heavy cloud of family weather to touch the weathered bark of the post, trusting the dense wood to hold its ground while the story rests against its grain. Watch what happens in your imagination when you let the thought rest there. Picture a cold, thick mountain fog rolling silently up from the lower valley. The gray mist surges over the ridge, wrapping softly around the cedar post, covering its knots, its grain, and the rusted staples on its face. Notice how the cedar post remains completely motionless in the center of the mist. The gray fog swirls around its sides, condenses into tiny, clear water drops against its bark, and then glides past into the wide, dark sky above the mountain. The cedar post does not reach out to grab the mist. It does not argue with the vapor, nor does it try to push the fog back down into the valley. It simply stands anchored in the deep shale, solid, quiet, and completely untouched by the moisture drifting through its air. If your mind strays back into its old habit of drafting explanations, or worrying about what your relatives think of your boundaries, there is no need to feel frustrated with yourself. Your mind has been trying to protect your safety through over-explaining for a very long time, and old trails in the mind do not disappear in a single night. Whenever you catch yourself running down the slope again, simply notice that movement with a soft, forgiving heart. You can quietly say to yourself, "My feet are trying to chase the fog again," and then imagine stepping back onto the high ridge. You can return to this anchored cedar post whenever you are ready, as many times as you need tonight. There is no emotional test you must pass before you are allowed to fall asleep. You do not need to resolve every conflict in your family tree, nor do you need to convince your relatives that your boundaries are just before the morning comes. Healing your relationship with your family is not a dramatic, sudden victory where everyone finally agrees. It is a series of quiet, hidden moments where you choose to let the mist drift past your shoulders without running after it. Even a single breath spent standing firm in your own shale allows your nervous system to taste the quiet safety that lives beyond conflict. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your ribs, lifting your chest slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. The solid weight of your hips, your lower back, and your legs is completely held by the mattress beneath you. You do not need to hold up your family's house tonight. You do not need to prove your goodness to anyone in this dark room. The bed is holding you. The room is enclosing you. And the ancient shale beneath your house is strong enough to support your entire life without asking for a single explanation. In a short while, we will travel further along the mountain pass toward a drafty weaving loft overlooking a foggy mountain notch, where a weary sister must learn what happens when we try to weave broken fiber into our own loom. But for now, allow yourself to remain right here in your bed. Let the cedar post stand quietly in the mountain shale. Let your hands remain soft and resting on the sheets, knowing that nothing needs to be explained, nothing needs to be fixed, and that your quiet core is completely safe enough to rest. Farther up the mountain pass, where cold air whistled through a narrow notch between two high cliffs, stood a drafty timber lodge. The air inside the high loft smelled of dry pine smoke, coarse hemp fiber, cold mountain mist, and sheep tallow. In this lofty room lived an elder sister named Hannah, who worked as a weaver. For decades, Hannah's younger siblings and aging parents had brought her their tangled, snapped ropes, dumping bunches of frayed hemp fibers into her lap. They demanded that she mend every tier, respin their brittle thread, and weave a smooth, flawless bolt of cloth for the entire family estate. Whenever a rope snapped under a load or a strap frayed during transport, her family accused Hannah of spinning weak yarn, blaming her for every bundle that fell into the ravine. Hannah lived with a heavy, sharp knot of resentment locked beneath her ribs. She spent her nights sitting at a large oak loom, desperately trying to force her family's coarse, brittle thread into her warp. Her hands were raw, covered in deep cracks from pulling dry hemp fibers through the reed. She gripped a heavy hand-carved wooden shuttle that was worn smooth by dry palms, using it like a weapon to force the chaotic threads into line. Whenever her family sent down another basket of broken, mud-stained fibers, Hannah would weep with anger, over-explaining her methods to the empty room. Yet she compulsively fed every broken strand into her machine, convinced that if she refused to mend their mess, the whole household would collapse into winter poverty. In the corner of the loft near a small iron brazier sat Mother Yasu, an old blind weaver who had spent 50 years at the high looms. Mother Yasu could no longer see the colors of the yarn, but her hearing was razor sharp, and her calloused hands could read the tension of a single hemp thread from across the room. She listened every night to the violent, rhythmic clatter of Hannah's shuttle, hearing the wood bang against the frame as Hannah tried to force brittle, rot-damaged strands into the warp, snapping thread after thread in the dark. One freezing evening, as a thick wall of fog rolled through the mountain notch and rattled the timber shutters, Hannah's younger brother arrived at the lodge door. He threw a heavy, mud-caked bundle of snapped hemp rope onto the floorboards, cursing Hannah for not making the strands thicker, demanding that she stay up all night to reweave his entire load. After he slammed the heavy oak door and stormed back down the trail, Hannah sat on her bench, her chest heaving, her vision blurred with bitter tears. She picked up her heavy wooden shuttle, knuckles white, preparing to spend another sleepless night, forcing her brother's rotten hemp into her loom. Before Hannah could throw the shuttle through the warp, Mother Yasu rose quietly from her stool. The blind elder walked slowly across the creaking floorboards, her dark indigo skirt brushing against the hemp scraps. She reached out her aged, spotted hand and placed her palm directly over Hannah's white knuckles, bringing the wooden shuttle to a complete halt in midair. Mother Yasu did not offer words of pity, nor did she curse the brother who had just left. Instead, she took the mud-stained bundle of snapped hemp from the floor and laid it across Hannah's bare lap. She then picked up a spool of fine long-staple flax thread that Hannah had spun for her own winter coat, setting it on the bench beside the rough hemp. The blind elder asked Hannah to close her eyes and take the heavy wooden shuttle in her right hand. She asked her to feel the difference between the thread she had spun for her own soul and the rotten, mud-soaked fiber her family had dumped on her knees. Hannah closed her eyes, her breath coming in jagged, shallow gasps. She touched the fine flax thread first. It felt smooth, long, cool, and strong, carrying a natural spring that yielded to the fingers without snapping. Then she touched her brother's matted hemp. The fiber was coarse, brittle, full of sharp burrs, stiffened by dried mud, and completely rotted from being left out in the winter rain. Mother Yasu leaned down, her voice clear and low above the whistling wind. She asked Hannah why she was trying to force a rotten strand through a fine wooden shuttle. She asked if a weaver could ever make a strong blanket when half the fiber fed into the loom was already dead before it touched the reed. Hannah's voice shook as she answered that if she did not weave her brother's thread, he would freeze on the high road, and her family would call her a cruel, heartless sister. She insisted that she had no choice except to force every broken strand into her cloth, even if the work destroyed her hands and broke her loom. Mother Yasu reached out and gently unclasped Hannah's fingers from the wooden shuttle. She took the heavy shuttle and set it down quietly on the timber frame. She told Hannah that a shuttle was built to carry thread smoothly from one side of the warp to the other, not to grind rocks into flour. She explained that when a family continually brings rotten, mud-soaked fiber to the loom, the weaver's duty is not to break her own hands trying to weave dirt into silk. Her true duty is to hand the fiber back, whole and unspun, so they can learn to store their own hemp out of the rain. Hannah sat completely still in the drafty loft, the cold weight of the mud-caked bundle pressing against her knees. She felt a familiar hot wave of panic rise in her chest, the old urge to pick up the shuttle, to prove her loyalty, to fix the mess before dawn. But then she paused. She took one long, quiet breath through her nose, feeling the cool mountain air travel deep into her stomach. She allowed the panic to exist without immediately reaching for the shuttle. She opened her eyes and looked at the heavy bundle of matted hemp. For the first time in her life, she saw that the rot in the fiber was not her fault. The mud on the strands was not caused by her weaving. Her brother's carelessness was his own weather, and her years of sleepless, frantic labor had only allowed him to keep leaving his rope in the dirt. With slow, unhurried movements, Hannah lifted the mud-stained bundle off her lap. She did not throw it in rage, nor did she curse her brother's name into the wind. She walked across the loft to the high wooden shelf near the door. Setting the matted hemp down in a dry, neat pile, she chose to leave the thread unspun, not out of malice, but out of a quiet, unshakable respect for her own loom. She returned to her bench, picked up her wooden shuttle, and threaded it with the fine, clean flax she had spun for her own coat. As she threw the shuttle smoothly through the warp, the wood made a soft, rhythmic click against the frame, steady, light, and perfectly balanced. Hannah knew that when morning came, her brother would return and rage at the unspun bundle sitting on the shelf. She knew he would call her selfish, and that his words would float through the lodge like the freezing fog outside the shutters. But as her hands guided the smooth shuttle through the loom, she felt a quiet, immovable space open inside her chest. The fog could rattle the timber walls all night, but it could no longer tell her shuttle which thread to weave. The experience of Hannah, laying down her heavy shuttle, illuminates a profound truth about how our nervous systems carry old household burdens. So much of our chronic internal exhaustion stems from a hidden habit of taking responsibility for the emotional weather of other people. We turn ourselves into living boundary markers, standing on open ridges in high winds, believing that if we absorb every gust of blame or frustration, we are keeping the entire valley safe. We confuse our willingness to be battered with genuine devotion. This instinct to manage another person's chaotic inner climate is usually rooted in a fear of uncertainty and abandonment. When someone in our family or social circle enters a state of distress, their instability feels like an immediate threat to our own foundation. Our mind instantly launches into high alert, searching for ways to regain control over the room. We analyze their tone, anticipate their accusations, and rehearse future explanations in our heads, desperately trying to build an internal shield that will neutralize their anger before it touches our home. We convince ourselves that if we can just fix their mood for them, we can restore safety to our shared world. Yet this habit of fixing foreign pain is a subtle form of self-judgment disguised as loyalty. When you constantly sacrifice your own peace to soothe someone else's volatility, you are quietly telling your own heart that its baseline well-being does not matter. You begin to define your purpose entirely through your ability to resolve the emotional emergencies around you, turning absorbed suffering into a permanent identity. You stop viewing yourself as a complete independent spirit who deserves quiet ground, and begin seeing yourself as an emergency post whose only job is to collect foreign mudslides until your own wood splits apart. Buddhist teaching offers us a clear, gentle way to unspool this habit without closing our hearts to the world. It asks us to look closely at the vital difference between the natural friction life brings and the heavy, secondary weight our own minds construct through resistance. Human existence brings inevitable moments of relational collision. Family members will experience grief, express unfair anger, or walk through periods of deep confusion. When you stand near someone who is struggling, the cold mist of their storm will naturally touch your skin. That initial chill is a normal condition of living among other feeling beings. However, the agonizing, sleepless depletion that keeps your chest tight at midnight is not that initial touch of rain. It is the extra weight created by your mind's decision to trap that mist inside your own timber. It is like a shepherd who notices a sudden mountain frost touching his neighbor's pasture, and out of sheer panic, runs out with an armful of dry cedar posts, driving them frantically into his own yard while wrapping his chest tightly in wet hemp rope, shivering uncontrollably in the freezing mud, binding his ribs and freezing his skin, creating a secondary agony entirely through his own resistance to the season. The mountain frost is the primary condition of the weather. The tight, ice-soaked hemp wrapped around his own lungs is the secondary suffering created entirely by his refusal to let the pasture be cold. Peace does not arrive when you somehow invent a way to banish every frost from the ridge. True freedom begins the very second you unwind the wet hemp from your chest, lay it down on the dry floorboards, and realize that your standing frame was never meant to act as a heating stove for the entire mountain. The neighbor's field must learn to endure the cold in its own soil. You can hold a warm lantern on the porch to offer them light, but binding your own lungs in wet rope does not warm a single blade of grass on their slope. Consider how much of your daily exhaustion comes from attempting to fix things that were never yours to manage. We absorb the accusations of others because we falsely believe that their pain is a problem we are required to solve. But another person's emotional storm is their own inner terrain, their own process of learning how to navigate the wilderness of their heart. When you constantly step into their mudslides to stop the earth from moving, or try to swallow their current into your own vessel, you deprive them of the very experience they need to discover their own grounding. When you surrender the impossible task of managing another person's inner climate, an immense weight lifts from your chest. The muscles along your spine, which have been locked tight for years to brace against impact, can finally begin to soften. Your lungs find room to expand fully, drawing in cool, clean air that belongs entirely to your own life. You begin to realize that holding a loving boundary is not an act of cruelty or selfishness. It is the highest form of respect you can offer to both yourself and the people you care about. You are permitted to be a person who offers deep, sincere warmth without allowing your own inner sanctuary to be flooded. Your capacity for love was never meant to be measured by how much mud you can trap in your grain. You do not need to earn your right to a peaceful night by taking on the burdens of everyone who crosses your path. You were created as a solid cedar boundary post, designed to hold your line in the deep shale without running down the slope after the fog. As you lie here in the dark, watching your breath move quietly through your chest, notice when your mind attempts to pull you back into its old habits of over-explaining. It might whisper that you are forgetting someone's pain, or that you need to figure out how to defend your character before tomorrow comes. Observe that thought with soft, unhurried presence. You do not need to fight the thought, nor do you need to follow where it leads. You can simply view it as a dry pine needle floating past on a cold mountain breeze, carrying no power to disturb the deep, quiet bedrock resting far beneath your bed. This wisdom of laying down the rotten hemp and standing like an anchored cedar post in deep shale is not a distant mountain idea. It belongs directly inside the sharp, cluttered frictions of your modern routine. It finds its truest value during those quiet hours when the mind starts picking up its old iron tools to defend your character or fix a family storm. Consider how easily this pattern unfolds on a completely ordinary evening. You sit on the edge of your couch, waiting for a reply to a message you sent hours ago to a relative or partner who felt distant. Instantly, an electric wave of panic shoots through your arms. You find yourself repeatedly tapping the glass of your screen, checking for reassurance, searching for a single sign that their internal weather has shifted back toward clear skies. You feel a frantic, desperate urge to type out long paragraphs of self-defense, to over-explain your motives, or to apologize for boundaries you had every right to set, believing that if you can just control their reaction, you will finally be allowed to breathe again. In that exact moment, when your thumb hovers above the cold screen with a pounding chest, you are standing on the high ridge reaching for the heavy crowbar. The mind screams that running down the slope into their fog is the only way to stay safe. But wisdom invites you to create one small, spacious pause before taking action. You can feel the cold floorboards beneath your heels. You can acknowledge the uncomfortable surge of fear in your stomach without obeying its demand to run down the mountain. Leaving the phone on the table, letting their unresolved mood sit on their side of the notch without wrapping your own ribs in wet rope, is how you hold your cedar post steady. It is a quiet, radical choice to trust that your core integrity remains intact, even when someone you care about is standing in the rain. Or think about those exhausting holiday dinners or family phone calls where you spend hours holding a polite smile while absorbing every hidden current of tension in the room. You listen to an elder drop passive accusations, or you watch a sibling project their failures onto your choices, and you feel a crushing weight settle onto your collarbones. You nod carefully, offer soothing words, and absorb their emotional heavy water until your own jaw begins to ache. On the drive home, you feel hollowed out, carrying a dark cloud that does not belong to your sky, wondering why you feel so deeply depleted after simply trying to keep the peace. When those heavy, absorbed accusations begin to cloud your thoughts, you can stop treating another person's turmoil as a reflection of your own spirit. You do not need to convert your body into a buffer to prove that your devotion is real. You can offer them warmth and deep attention while keeping the blunt end of your cedar post set deep in the rock, letting their heavy mist pass straight around your grain into the sky. You can love someone deeply while allowing them the space to walk through their own winter, without taking off your warm coat to freeze alongside them. Notice too how often you punish yourself for wanting quiet rest. You finish a long, demanding day where you have spent every hour managing other people's expectations. Yet the moment you lie down on your bed, a sharp voice of guilt whispers in the dark. It tells you that you are falling behind in life, that you have not earned the right to be still, or that there is still a household crisis somewhere in the valley that requires your intervention. It treats your fatigue as a character flaw, insisting that a truly good person would keep weaving broken fiber until they collapse. Yet the cedar boundary post standing on the high ridge does not ask permission from the storm to remain motionless in the shale. It simply stands in the mountain earth, letting the wild weather pass around its dense grain without shifting a single inch. Deep rest is not a reward reserved for those who have solved every conflict in their family tree. Rest is the fundamental quiet ground from which all clarity, strength, and genuine compassion bloom. Giving yourself total permission to lie completely flat in this dark room tonight, without solving a single person's crisis, is how you honor the unyielding core within your own spine. Living this path in modern life does not require you to cut ties with the people you love or abandon your responsibilities. It shows up in the quietest, simplest moments of your day. It is taking one slow, steady breath before responding to an accusatory tone. It is choosing not to replay a past argument 500 times in your mind before sleep. It is the brave, quiet realization that a fearful thought is merely a passing drift of gray mist, carrying no power to bend your wood unless you choose to trap it inside your ribs. You do not need to become a cold, unfeeling monument by tomorrow morning. The Zen path is not about building an impenetrable wall around your heart to keep the world out. It is simply about unhooking your fingers from that heavy, mud-stained bundle of hemp that you have carried out of habit for far too long. It is learning to recognize the instant your shoulders brace against a storm, and gently reminding yourself that you can remain wide open without running down the slope after the fog. When you practice caring for others without gripping their pain so tightly, your relationships transform into something deeply spacious, honest, and free. You can stand beside a struggling relative with a steady, unshakable warmth, offering them a quiet sanctuary because your own internal vessel is not flooded. You allow people the dignity of their own emotional weather, knowing that their storms do not define your light. You step out of the exhausting role of the constant fixer, entering the world as a clear, grounded presence that brings peace simply by standing firm in the shale. As these late hours settle softly around your home right now, allow these simple truths to cool the remaining heat in your mind. You have carried enough wooden stakes up the slippery mountain paths. You have held the heavy iron tools in enough cold drafts. The working day, with its endless emotional demands, its sudden family tensions, and its heavy atmospheres, has fully retreated into the dark. The night has opened a vast, peaceful shelter around your bed, giving you a quiet space where no weight needs to be held, no storm needs to be stored, and no defense needs to be spoken. Feel the easy, natural rhythm of your breath moving quietly through your chest. Your ribs rise slightly as cool air fills your lungs, and settle down with a long, soft sigh as the breath exits your throat. You are completely allowed to lay down your tools. You are permitted to let every borrowed accusation, every family drama, and every foreign burden dissolve into the wide, dark silence beyond your window. The deep shale beneath your house is resting, cool and vast, ready to absorb every drop you release without asking for anything in return. Now, let every sound of the mountain wind dissolve softly into the ancient shale beneath the high meadow. The stories of Ren's boundary post and Hannah's shuttle have completed their quiet, steady work inside your chest. They are no longer distant words spoken across a dark room, but are settling down like cold rain mist sinking through stone, reaching the immovable bedrock deep within your soul. The heavy iron crowbars have been set down forever. The rusted staples hold no wire. The mud-stained hemp has fallen away, leaving your hands empty, smooth and open to the cool night air. Your physical body is sinking into a deep, peaceful heaviness against the mattress. Feel the back of your shoulders unclamp their last subtle grip, releasing every ounce of tension into the steady support beneath you. Your eyelids feel heavy, smooth and resting in complete darkness, as if a cool alpine mist had washed away every trace of vigilance from behind your brow. The small muscles around your jaw drop open, leaving a soft space inside your mouth that allows your throat to feel broad, open, and clear like a solid cedar post standing on an empty ridge. Every breath moving through your chest is becoming slower, lighter, and almost silent. A soft intake of air arrives, lifting your ribs like a gentle night breeze passing through high meadow grass and then glides out like fog drifting over cold stone. Inhale, slow and spacious. Exhale, long, quiet, and weightless. You are not trying to manage the air moving through your lungs. You are simply allowing your body to breathe the way a mountain pass rests, steady, unforced, and completely whole in the dark. Picture a single cedar boundary post standing motionless on a high mountain ridge at midnight. A soft, cold night fog rolls steadily through the dark notch above, touching the weathered gray grain of the timber. The mist wraps around the wood, glides past its knots without stopping for a single second, and drifts cleanly out into the vast open sky above the valley. The post does not bend under the weight of the vapor. It does not swell, crack, or chase the fog down the slope. It simply stands in the quiet, dark, dense, upright, and completely unmoved, while the mountain weather returns naturally to the sea below. Inside your own chest, that same solid, anchored presence is opening wide. The heavy, matted bundle of family obligations that you carried for so long has fallen away completely. It has dropped onto the cold shelf of the past, leaving your spirit light, spacious, and free to breathe without a single strand binding your ribs. You do not need to look down the trail to see who is climbing the mountain. You do not need to brace your chest against the next storm. The quiet night has opened its vast arms around your bed, and the deep shale beneath your house is ready to hold whatever falls, leaving your heart entirely unburdened in the dark. Feel the profound, cool stillness spreading through your arms and hands. Feel your wrists resting motionless on the fabric of your sheets, your fingers completely uncurled and soft. There are no heavy stakes to drive across these late hours, no foreign accusations to store in your stomach, and no emotional debts to settle before dawn arrives. You have returned to the solid, unshakable sanctuary of your own true alignment. Give your mind total permission to drop its vigilance tonight. You do not have to solve the conflicts of the people you love before morning comes. You do not need to figure out how to clear the fog from the valley. Those heavy storms belong to the wider sky, and you are resting far inside the quiet ridge now, where no mist is trapped, no defense is spoken, and no proof of devotion is required beyond your own peaceful presence. If a quiet ripple of worry stirs in your thoughts, let it be like a single water drop touching the outer bark of the cedar, sliding down the gray wood and vanishing into the shale below. You do not need to capture the drop in your palm. You do not need to build a wall around its splash. You can simply let it glide away into the silent earth, leaving your solid core perfectly still, perfectly safe, and completely untouched. The night has built a quiet room around your sleep, protecting your weary bones from the noise of the world. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time, bringing its own weather and its own simple paths. But tonight belongs entirely to stillness. Tonight is a sacred, unhurried space where your heart is granted total permission to lay down its heavy tools, unclamp its tired joints, and sink into the vast, restorative depths of unburdened rest. You are safe here in the anchored quiet. Your heart knows how to beat without carrying foreign storms. Your lungs know how to breathe without holding the air. Your spirit knows how to heal itself when the mind finally drops the heavy shuttle and allows the mountain fog to pass harmlessly into the dark sky. Let yourself sink down through the soft, dark waters of sleep, floating down into the deep. Quiet stone where no burden is trapped, where no storm can bend your grain, and where your natural core remains forever clear, upright, and at peace. When the mountain fog has completely cleared from the high ridge at dawn, what remains of the cold storm except the quiet timber that stood firmly enough to let it pass? 3 YouTube title options. The high ridge rests in total quiet now, surrounded by the dark, broad vault of the night sky. The timber post standing in the shale does not ask the passing wind where it is going, nor does it demand that the cold fog give a reason for its presence. It simply exists in its own natural density, supported by the deep, ancient rock beneath the grass. When you allow your mind to step away from the endless labor of managing other people's perceptions, your whole spirit settles into that exact same effortless stability. So much of your life has been consumed by an invisible, exhausting war against clouds that were never yours to disperse. You have treated every mood in your household as an emergency that required your immediate intervention, believing that if you could just explain yourself clearly enough, the air would finally clear. But the mountain does not ask the timber to clear the mist. The mountain simply allows the mist to roll over the slopes, knowing that no cloud, no matter how thick or cold, has the power to shift the bedrock below. Allow yourself to feel the deep, physical relief of being completely unneeded in the valley tonight. There are no messages you must answer, no misjudgments you must correct, and no family histories you need to repair before morning. The dark room around you is a sanctuary of complete neutrality. The walls do not demand a defense from you, and the mattress beneath your spine asks for no explanations. You are permitted to be fully, quietly present in your own body, letting every old impulse to fix, explain, or prove your worth dissolve into the shadow. Feel how your breathing continues its slow, rhythmic work without any conscious direction from your mind. Air enters your lungs with a soft, cool expansion, lifting your ribs gently, and then flows back out into the room, leaving your chest completely soft and hollow. With every quiet release of air, imagine your awareness sinking deeper into your core, like a heavy stone finding its permanent place at the bottom of a deep mountain well. Your forehead is smooth and relaxed. Your eyes are resting comfortably behind closed lids, and your jaw is open just enough to let your throat remain wide and clear. When you stop trying to control the emotional weather of those around you, you offer them the greatest kindness possible, the freedom to experience their own lives. You step back from the exhausting role of the designated buffer, allowing the natural balance of the world to restore itself without your constant effort. You realize that your value as a human being was never tied to how well you managed the turmoil of others. You are worthy of quiet rest, worthy of unbroken peace, and worthy of living your own life without apology. Picture the mountain pass stretching out under the silent midnight stars. The grass in the high meadow is cool and damp with night dew, holding the deep, peaceful scent of wild thyme and dark earth. The old boundary post stands tall and unmoving against the horizon, its weathered gray wood gleaming faintly under the starlight. The fog has completely passed, drifting far out over the distant valley, leaving the air clear, crisp, and still. Everything on the ridge has returned to its natural, unforced order, resting deeply in the quiet dark. Let your mind float softly into that same boundless, peaceful expanse. Your body is heavy, warm, and completely supported by the bed beneath you, drifting closer and closer to total surrender. There is nothing left for you to do tonight, nowhere else you need to be, and no burden you need to carry into tomorrow. The quiet night holds you safely in its arms, offering a deep, unbroken shelter where your spirit can finally drop its tools and rest. Sinking down now, softly and effortlessly, into the deep, dark sanctuary of sleep, floating down into the quiet bedrock where no explanation is needed, where no accusation can reach, and where your true core rests forever calm, grounded, and profoundly at peace.